The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad is a former Class I railroad company in the United States, with its last headquarters in Dallas. Established in 1865 under the name Union Pacific Railway, Southern Branch, it came to serve an extensive rail network in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. In 1988, it merged with the Missouri Pacific Railroad and is now part of Union Pacific Railroad. In its earliest days, the market was commonly referred to as the Katy, which was its stock exchange symbol. This common designation soon evolved into the Katy. The Katy was the first railroad to enter Texas from the north through Denison, Texas. Eventually, the Katy's core system would grow to link Parsons, Fort Scott, Junction City, Olathe, and Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Joplin, Jefferson City, and St. Louis, Missouri, Tulsa and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, Temple, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Galveston, Texas. An additional main line between Fort Worth and Salina, Kansas, was added in the 1980s after the collapse of the Chicago, Rock Island and Pacific Railroad. This line was operated as the Oklahoma, Kansas and Texas Railroad. At the end of 1970, it operated 2,623 miles of road and 3,765 miles of track. History. When it incorporated in May 1870, the Missouri, Kansas and Texas Railroad acquired the Union Pacific Railway, Southern Branch and its 182 miles of track in Kansas. At the time of 1870 incorporation, consolidations were also made with the Labette and Sedalia Railway Co. and the Neosho Valley and Holden Railway Co. It also acquired the Tebow and Neosho Railroad Co., the St. Louis and Santa Fe Railroad Co., and the Hannibal and Central Missouri Railroad Co. Combined with the Southern Branch, these small, newly built railroads formed the foundation on which the Katy were built. Congress had passed acts promising land grants to the first railroad to reach the Kansas border via the Neosho Valley. The Katy portion of the former Southern Branch, which had begun building from Fort Riley just north of Junction City, Kansas, was in a heated competition for the prize. On June 6, 1870, Katy workers laid the first rails across the Kansas border, winning the race. Congress promised land grants were never made, as the courts overturned the grants because the land was in Indian territory and was the property of the Indian tribes. The Katy continued its push southward, laying track through the territory and reaching Texas in 1872, acquiring other small railroads while extending its reach to Dallas in 1886, Waco in 1888, Houston in April 1893 and to San Antonio in 1901. When the Katy Railroad reached Houston, its joint ownership of the Galveston, Houston and Henderson Railroad gave it immediate access to the port of Galveston and its ocean-going shipping on the Gulf of Mexico. In 1896, as a publicity stunt set up by William Crush, the Katy crashed two locomotives head-on, pulling loaded trains, out of sight, that came to be known thereafter as Crush, Texas. The collision occurred before more than 40,000 spectators, 3 of whom died by debris from the exploding boilers. The ragtime composer and pianist Scott Joplin, who was performing in the area at the time, commemorated the event in his song, The Great Crush Collision March. In 1911, the market purchased railroad lines held by the industrialist Joseph A. Kemp of Wichita Falls, Texas. These included the Wichita Falls Railway, an 18-mile line between Wichita Falls and Henrietta in Clay County, the Wichita Falls and Northwest Railway Company of Texas, and the Wichita Falls and Wellington, which provided service into Wellington in Collingsworth County. Kemp's brother-in-law, Frank Gull, was a partner in some of these lines, including the Wichita Falls and Southern Railroad, which remained a Kemp-Kell property until it was abandoned in 1954. In 1923, the Katy acquired another Kemp-Kell property, the Wichita Falls and Northwestern Railway, which extended from Wichita Falls to Forgan in the Oklahoma Panhandle. The route to Forgan was abandoned in 1973, and Altus, Oklahoma, became the northern terminus of the railroad. The remaining 77-mile link between Wichita Falls and Altus was absorbed in 1991 by the Wichita, Tillman and Jackson Railway. The Katy acquired the Beaver, Mead and Englewood Railroad in 1931. From 1915 until January 4, 1959, the Katy, in a joint venture with the St. Louis-San Francisco Railway, operated the Texas Special from St. Louis to Dallas-Fort Worth and San Antonio. It sported rail cars with names including Sam Houston, Stephen F. Austin, David Crockett, and James Bowie after prominent men of the state. On August 12, 1988, the Missouri Pacific Railroad and its owner, Union Pacific, purchased the Katy with approval from the Interstate Commerce Commission. The merging and restructuring of railroads during the 1980s had cost the Katy much overhead traffic, and it had been seeking a merger partner. On December 1, 1989, the Katy was merged into the MOPAC, which is now a part of the Union Pacific system. In the Rails to Trails program, much of the Missouri track line has been adapted for use as a Katy Trail State Park, including a spur to Columbia, a Missouri state park which runs along the Missouri River for the major portion of its route. In downtown Dallas, a 3.5-mile long section called the Katy Trail is being converted into a multi-use trail linking White Rock Lake to the American Airlines Center. In 1997, the segment linking Katy, Texas to downtown Houston was abandoned and stripped of rails soon after. The section between Katy and Interstate 610 was purchased by the Texas Department of Transportation in 1998 for the expansion of Katy Freeway. The line that went into Houston was purchased by the city's Parks and Recreation Department. In 2009 it was adapted and paved as the Heights Bike Trail. As part of a new heritage program, in July 2005 Union Pacific unveiled a new EMDSD-78 locomotive, Union Pacific 1988, painted in traditional market colors. Passenger trains. The Katy operated the following named passenger trains. Train numbers Chapter 1 and 2, the Texas Special, St. Louis, Missouri, San Antonio, Texas jointly with the St. Louis-San Francisco Railway, then Kansas City, San Antonio, then Kansas City, Dallas. Train numbers Chapter 3 and 4, Katy Limited. Train numbers Chapter 5 and 6, Katy Flyer. Train numbers Chapter 7 and 8, Bluebonnet. Paint schemes 1870 to 1880s. Early steam locomotives were dark maroon, with large oval medallion on the side and back of the tenders, with a field of Chinese vermilion and the letters MK and AMP-T. RW. Inside the oval and on the side of the crew cab, a 1 1/2 inch gold line on the outer edge, and the number of the engine in the center of field in gold, black shaded and split on the rear of the tender. All passenger engines were finished with gold lettering and striping. Rolling stock used colors common in those days, i.e., boxcar brown, caboose red, etc. 1880s–1900s, steam locomotive livery was simplified after the J. Gould gained control of the railroad. Gould instructed shop personnel to paint all engines black and place the railroad initials MK and AMP-T in about 12-inch letters on the side of the tender tank bordered by half-inch striping. The engine number was placed on side of the crew cab, side of the sand dome, coping of the tender and back of tender. Rolling stock used colors common in those days, i.e. boxcar brown, caboose red, etc. 1900s–1923, steam locomotive livery was simplified to overall shiny black, dark graphite smokebox door and stack. The color of all lettering and numbers was changed to white. The road name MK and AMP-T was moved to the side of the crew cab, along with the engine number. The engine number was painted on the side of the tenders in large numerals and on the rear in smaller numerals. The number remained on the sand dome. Rolling stock used colors common in those days, i.e. boxcar brown, caboose red, etc. 1928–1947, steam locomotives were shiny black with the Market Herald on the tenders. Rolling stock used colors common in those days, i.e. boxcar brown, caboose red, etc. 1947–1957, diesels were bright red with silver side panels and cream yellow on top of the nose hoods. Passenger cars were painted to match. Boxcars, cabooses, and other rolling stock were frequently painted Sloan yellow. 1957–1965, diesels were painted an inferior red which quickly oxidized with yellow road numbers. The D. Ramus-era Herald was an elongated version of the original style but changed to read simply Katy in red letters on a gold background. The text and Herald were outlined in black. 1965–1971, the Katy returned to a bright red paint, perhaps deeper than that used 1947–1957. They also returned to the original shaped Herald but still read Katy. 1971–1988, diesel locomotives, cabooses, and other rolling stock were painted green with yellow stripes, lettering and numbering. The first Katy locomotive painted into this scheme was GP7 number 123. In its final years, the Katy acquired several locomotives second-hand which, due to its impending acquisition by Union Pacific, were not painted into the standard green and yellow scheme. Market acquired 18 GP40s from Conrail in late 1983 that were numbered 231 to 248. A set of 9 GP39-2s were acquired from Kennecott Copper Corporation in late 1984. XKCC number 779 to 783, 785, and 787 to 789 were renumbered market number 380 to 388. In 1985, 3 additional GP38s were purchased from Conrail that were numbered 322 to 324, and finally, 19 GP38 ACs were purchased from Illinois Central Gulf and numbered 325 to 343. The changes in MKT's red paint were most likely due to problems with fading in the intense Texas sun. This may also have been the reason to change to green in 1970. Company offices. Presidents of the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad. Judge Levi Parsons, prior to 1878. J. Gould, 1880. George J. Gould, 1886 to 1887. Charles E. Schaff, 1923 to 1926. Charles N. Whitehead, 1926. Columbus Hiley, 1927 to 1930. Michael H. Cahill, 1930 to 1934. Matthew S. Sloan, 1934–1945. Donald V. Fraser, 1945–1956. William N. D. Ramus III, 1957–1961. Charles T. Williams, 1961–1965. John W. Barriger III, 1965–1970. Reginald N. Whitman, 1970–1975. Harold L. Gassler, 1975–1988.